When I stepped inside the old Cape Solace Lighthouse, the air felt wrong, like the place was breathing. The lamp kept turning, even though the power was dead. And somewhere beneath the floorboards, I swear I heard voices, muffled, pleading, like the sea itself was speaking. Then I found the journal, Elias Voss's handwriting, trembling with guilt, talking about debts to the sea and keeping the light fed. When the storm hit that night, the beacon started flashing in a pattern, SOS, over and over. But the signal wasn't calling for help, it was calling something back. I saw faces in the glass, drowned sailors, children, all staring at me like they knew my name. And when the recorder crackled with Elias's voice whispering, "You saw the light, now you bear it," I realized the truth. The sea never forgets its debts. It just finds someone new to collect them. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support means the world and helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us until the end, and if this mystery moves you, share your thoughts in the comments and pass it along to a friend. I still remember that night like it's carved into my bones. October 4th, 2021. The night Cape Solace swallowed my brother whole. The storm had rolled in early, heavy and gray, like it was carrying bad news. It didn't want to say out loud. The lighthouse beams sliced through sheets of rain, flashing every 12 seconds. The same rhythm Ethan used to joke about when we were kids. "That's the heartbeat of the coast," he'd say, tapping it out on the table while Mom told him to quit fidgeting. That heartbeat stopped meaning safety to me after that night. Ethan had been working alone at the Cape Solace Lighthouse, studying marine light patterns and plankton shifts. Something about bioluminescence migration. He was obsessed with it, like it was more than science, like it was something spiritual. He used to say, "There's language in the light, Sarah. You just have to listen long enough." That morning, he'd radioed the harbor, saying he was heading toward Devil's Teeth Shoals to collect night samples before the storm hit. Everyone warned him not to go. The shoals had a reputation: jagged rocks, unpredictable currents, and sudden whiteouts that could turn a calm sea into chaos. But Ethan, he never listened when he thought discovery was close. By sundown, the storm had grown teeth. The locals huddled in the dockside tavern, watching the lightning flash across the black water. A lobsterman named Jim Decker said he saw Ethan's skiff cutting through the fog, one small light bobbing against the madness. He said it looked like the ocean was trying to erase him. When the coast finally calmed by dawn, they found his boat, half submerged on the rocks near Devil's Teeth. No sign of him. Just his notebook sealed in a plastic bag and one broken oar. That's when Detective Arthur Vance showed up. Silver hair slicked back, eyes cold, suit too clean for the mud he was standing in. Everyone in town knew he was weeks away from retirement, and everyone knew he didn't care to complicate those weeks. He barely looked at me when I asked about my brother. Just said, "Ma'am, we've seen this before. Stress, burnout, maybe a breakup. Folks walk away from their lives more than you'd think." I wanted to scream. Ethan wasn't folks. He had plans. He had day to do. He'd been texting me that morning about a new species of plankton that glowed green under certain tides. But Vance wasn't listening. He called off the search within 48 hours, told the press Ethan had likely chosen to disappear. Two fishermen on the pier muttered behind my back that night. I still remember their voices. "You think the kid did it on purpose?" "Maybe. Lighthouse duty'll drive you mad, you know." "His sister doesn't want to admit it." "Let her be." I didn't even turn around. I just stood there, staring at the waves like maybe if I looked long enough, I'd see him. See that yellow wetsuit against the black water. But there was nothing. Just the wind and the faint pulse of that damned lighthouse light. Over the next few days, I watched the investigation shrink like a dying fire. The local papers stopped printing updates. The volunteer divers who came forward were told to stand down. Vance said they'd covered all reasonable coastal areas. That word, reasonable, still makes my skin crawl. When I tried to hire a private search crew, I got a letter from the sheriff's office saying the area was under official restriction. Vance had filed it himself. "Too dangerous," he claimed. But really, he just didn't want more questions. Every time I called his office, he'd sound bored. Miss Hayes, I understand your grief, but sometimes closure means accepting the facts. What facts? There weren't any. At night, I'd drive down to the cliffs and sit in my car with the windows down, listening to the waves break against the rocks below. Sometimes I'd swear I could hear faint tapping beneath the wind, rhythmic, patient, like someone sending a message through stone. I told myself it was just the buoy chains. That's what everyone said. But deep down, no. Something in me knew he was out there. By the end of the week, the official search had become a line item in a forgotten file. Vance moved on to clearing out his desk. Reporters stopped calling. And I started collecting everything they ignored. Copies of reports, radio transcripts, weather logs. I didn't know what I was looking for back then, but I knew this. My brother hadn't walked away. He'd been left behind. That lighthouse kept shining every night, the same 12-second rhythm, cutting through the fog like it was mocking me. Every flash was a reminder. He was still part of this coast, even if no one else cared enough to look. I didn't know it then, but the lies had already started. The truth was buried beneath those waves. And it would take 2 long years for the sea to finally give him back. I didn't sleep for days after the town cooled off. Not from grief exactly, from a kind of slow-burning anger that kept my hands clenched on the steering wheel until they ached. I started knocking on doors. I sat in the diner until closing, listening. People talk when they think no one's listening. They let slips, small, casual things, fall out. That's how I found the pieces. First, the retired Coast Guard spotter, Tom Reyes. He lived in a trailer by the harbor with a radio that never really shut off. Tom had salt in his voice and stories stitched into his skin. When I asked him if he'd seen anything the night Ethan disappeared, he hesitated like he was pulling a thread too tight. "Sarah," he said, rubbing his jaw. I heard tapping, not the wind. Something like 3 taps, a pause, 3 more. Kept repeating. Came from near the Bluefin Caves. Sounded human. He tapped his old pipe against the table, slow and deliberate. I filed it with the sheriff. Figured they'd listen. I went to the sheriff's office with Tom to find the report buried under coffee stains. It had been filed, stamped, and then nothing. Vance had glanced at it, shoved it into a stack, and the stack had become a tomb. When I asked about it, the deputy shrugged like an old coat. He said could be buoy chains, miss. Easy mistake. Easy for him to say, harder for me. Then came the teenager, the girl from the mainland campsite. Kids see things, adults dismiss them, and those tiny observations go missing. But a kid's honesty can be sharp. She described mirror flashes over the restricted shoals. A pattern. 3 quick glints, pause, 3 more. She mimed it with her hands in the diner, like she was telling a ghost story. They were coming from the rocks, she whispered, eyes wide, voice low. Like someone was trying to send a signal, real old school. Not a camera, not a flare. It had a beat. The ranger who logged her report told me later how Vance had laughed. Short, brittle. Teenage imagination, he said. We've all been kids under the stars. The ranger's hand went to his cap like he was smoothing a lie into place. And then there was the maintenance worker, a man named Earl, who kept the lighthouse's old mechanisms from seizing up. He brought me a photograph one cold morning, a bright scrap of fabric caught on a spike of rock where a tidal inlet narrowed into a hidden pocket. Yellow. Torn. A piece of neoprene with frayed stitches. Ethan's wetsuit was yellow. Earl swore he'd given the coordinates to the desk. Vance had called it common debris and marked it as no action. He'd hung up on Earl mid-sentence. Earl's hands trembled when he showed me the photo. He kept rubbing at his thumb like he was erasing fingerprints. 3 reports. 3 small threads that, if pulled, might have led somewhere warm and human instead of cold and final. Each one was easy to dismiss. Buoy chains, teenage fantasy, common debris, if you wanted them to be. If you wanted the file to close. I started keeping the copies in a battered shoebox under my bed. I called the reporters who'd covered the initial story and begged them to come back. Some did. Most didn't. There were whispers in the tavern now, Words meant to sting. Obsessed sister, grief cash grab, let the past bury itself. Two fishermen argued across a table about whether paying divers was worth the risk. We gonna toss good money after bad? He's gone. Or we gonna let some old cop with a pension tell us how to grieve? The sound of the debate was a low, pulsing thing, like a distant engine. The thing about grief is it sharpens things you didn't know were sharp. It gave me focus. It gave me a list. I began to file formal complaints. I mailed letters that I stamped and dated, the way you show the world you mean business. I documented calls. I recorded the dismissals. Each refusal became a bead on a rosary I was making out of anger and memory. In early 2023, I sat across from a woman named Captain Lisa Hammond in a state police office that smelled of coffee and cleaning solvent. She looked like someone who had kept her eyes open too long, alert, tired, the kind of person who could hold two truths at once. I handed her my shoebox and watched her flip through the reports, her lips thinning with the same slow recognition I felt every time I thought of Ethan stranded out there. "We're reopening this," she said, and the words landed like rain on parched soil. Not dramatic, no gavel slam, no cinematic reveal, just a steady, real-world determination. She explained the quiet mechanics of official work. Paperwork, chain of custody, budgeting for dives, requesting specialists, small, precise moves. One by one, the bureaucracy that had been an obstacle now became the path. It felt like justice beginning as a whisper. But I couldn't pretend relief. 2 years is a long time to carry the kind of patience that keeps you from tearing down a town hall. I kept hearing the old reports in my head, the way Tom tapped the table, the girl's fingers miming flashes, Earl's thumb rubbing like it was trying to smooth out a memory. Each little human detail haunted me more than any headline ever could. Vance didn't go quietly. He protested the reopening, issued terse statements about resource allocation, and painted the family as opportunists. In the market, a woman spat what she'd heard back into the wind. She just wants money. My throat tightened so badly I could barely swallow. All the while, the lighthouse kept pulsing, indifferent and steady. Its light didn't care about paperwork. It only cared about the sea. And the sea kept hoarding things, stories, bones, messages, until someone pulled at the right thread. Captain Hammond promised me meticulousness. She kept her promise. She treated each discarded tip like evidence, not rumor. She listened to Tom, took the teen's testimony seriously, and pestered a reluctant Earl for coordinates until the man could no longer put the memory away. It was the slow way the world sometimes makes right. Not with a single thunderous act, but with a patient, painstaking stacking of truths. I watched that stacking like you watch a tide come in, gradual, inevitable, and finally, unstoppable. I didn't sleep that night. The storm had ended, but the air felt heavier than before, like the ocean itself was holding its breath. Every few minutes I'd glance toward the tower through the window, watching the light revolve, cutting through the fog like a blade. By dawn, the sea was quiet again. Too quiet. The waves lapped against the rocks with that slow, lazy rhythm that comes after a storm, like the world pretending nothing happened. But I knew better. I strapped on my boots, grabbed the journal I'd found, and climbed back to the lighthouse. The steps creaked in protest under my weight, and each echo of my boots felt like a heartbeat out of place. The door to Elias's quarters groaned when I pushed it open. Everything was exactly how he left it. The mug half full of cold tea, the pipe on the table, the old wool jacket draped over a chair. I opened the journal again, determined to read more. The ink was smudged in places as if written in haste or fear. "The sea remembers," one line read, "and it always takes back what it's owed." There were dates, crossed out names of ships I recognized from the local archives. Shipwrecks, every one of them, some over a century old, others recent. Then I found something worse. A sketch of the shoreline, the same rocky coast below the lighthouse, and marked in red ink, an X. Underneath, a single word, debt. My pulse quickened. I don't know what I expected to find, but curiosity pulled me down the cliffside path. The tide was out. revealing jagged stones and the exposed ribs of wrecked ships long forgotten. And there, near the X, was a cluster of wooden crates, half buried in sand. I dug at one until my fingers bled against the splinters. Inside was metal, old coins, corroded by salt. Dozens of them. British, Dutch, Portuguese, centuries old. Treasure from wrecks. Elias must have been collecting it, or salvaging it. But that wasn't the secret. Not yet. As I turned to leave, something shimmered beneath the crates. A piece of glass, round, cracked. I pulled it free. It wasn't glass. It was part of a lens, like the kind used in a lighthouse lamp. That's when it hit me. Elias's light wasn't guiding ships. It was tricking them. The old journal's warnings suddenly made sense. The debts, the wrecks, the guilt. He'd been using the light, angling it, to draw ships toward the rocks during storms, then salvaging what the sea destroyed. But why write about it? Why leave a record? I ran back to the lighthouse, the wind tearing through my coat, mind racing faster than my steps. Inside, the walls seemed to close in. I flipped through the journal again, pages trembling between my fingers until I reached the last entry. The storms won't forgive me. I see them now, every night, the faces in the fog. I can't keep the light on anymore. If I do, they'll come again. If I don't, I'll see them in the dark. The sea doesn't let you choose your punishment. The next page was blank, except for a smudge. A thumbprint, dark and oily, at the bottom corner. I set the journal down. That's when I heard it. Faint, rhythmic tapping from upstairs. My legs moved before my thoughts caught up. Step after step, up the spiral staircase. The tapping got louder, sharper. Not random. It was deliberate. A pattern. Tap, 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 pause, tap. I froze halfway up, my breath clouded in the cold air. The sound came from the lantern room. When I reached the top, the lamp was spinning slowly, its gears whining with every rotation. The room was filled with that eerie golden glow. On the glass, scrawled with something dark and sticky, were words, almost invisible under the reflection of the light. Do not trust the light. And there, beside the mechanism, lay the final message. Not written, recorded. A small tape recorder, rusted, wrapped in a strip of oilcloth. I pressed play with a shaking finger. The tape hissed before a voice cracked through. Elias's voice. If you're hearing this, it means the sea has chosen another. I never meant for it to go this far. The wrecks were supposed to be my way out, not my curse. But it doesn't stop. It never stops. Every time I light the lamp, they answer. The drowned ones, the lost ones. They whisper in the fog. And if I ignore them, they come closer. Static. Then silence. I felt a lump rise in my throat. My reflection wavered in the lamp glass, distorted by the light's rotation. For a moment, I saw someone else's face staring back. Pale. Hollow-eyed. I stumbled back down, clutching the recorder like a lifeline. Outside, the ocean shimmered with a faint, unnatural glow, like hundreds of faint lanterns flickering beneath the waves. And as the wind shifted, I swear I heard them, distant voices, carried on the tide. Calling my name. I turned back toward the lighthouse, heart pounding, realizing something terrible. The light was still on, and it wasn't me who turned it. I didn't remember how long I stood there, watching the beam revolve above the waves. The light swept across the sea like a ghost's eye, slow and unblinking. Every time it passed, the reflection of those flickering shapes beneath the surface shimmered back. Faces, hands, something moving just below. I told myself to leave, to walk away, report everything, let the authorities handle it. But there's a pull in places like this, a strange gravity, the kind that convinces you that the truth will stay buried unless you dig it up. So I climbed back into the tower one last time. The air inside felt wrong, heavy, metallic. The old stones seemed to hum, vibrating faintly, like they remembered what Elias had done. At the top, the lamp kept turning. Slow, deliberate. Each rotation creaked like the breath of something ancient. I stepped closer and saw that the gears, those massive iron wheels, were moving even though the power switch was off. And then, that voice again. A faint whisper. Low. Layered. Like a dozen throats murmuring under the floorboards. You saw the light. Now you bear it. I froze. The words didn't come from the recorder or from outside. They were inside the walls. The journal lay open where I'd left it, the final page glinting with fresh ink. Fresh, debt repaid. That's when the lamp flickered. The room went dark for half a second, and in that flash of absence I saw them. Faces pressed against the glass of the lantern room, water dripping down their cheeks. Sailors, women, children, the drowned, Elias's victims. When the light returned, they were gone. But the feeling remained. I don't know how long I stood there, paralyzed between the turning lamp and the whisper of the sea. My mind was clawing for reason, something tangible to hold on to. But then, a gust of wind slammed the door behind me, and the recorder crackled to life again, unprompted. You can't unsee the light, Elias's voice rasped. If it calls, answer. If you ignore it, it finds another way. And just like that, the mechanism stopped. The room fell silent. The light froze mid-rotation, its beam pointed straight into the sea. For a few seconds, the ocean glowed back, brighter, fuller. Then it all went dark, the kind of darkness that eats sound. When I finally stumbled outside, the fog was gone. The morning sun was cutting through, painting the cliffs gold. The lighthouse stood still, quiet for the first time since I'd arrived. I thought it was over. I handed the journal and recorder to the authorities. They didn't believe half of it, of course. Said Elias's mind had broken under isolation, guilt, and the bottle. That he'd imagined voices, written his madness into the walls. They said I must have been spooked by the storm, the isolation. Typical psychological dismissal. They sealed off the lighthouse, declared it a historic hazard site. No one was allowed inside anymore. But weeks later, people in the nearby town started talking. Whispering, really. Fishermen saying they'd seen a faint light turning out there again on foggy nights. One swore he heard a man calling out from the rocks. Another claimed to see silhouettes near the cliffs. And then there were the two kids from the harbor. One evening, they came running back, pale as ghosts. Said the light flickered Morse code. Over and over. The same 3 words. Help. The keeper. I didn't tell them what I knew. Didn't tell them I still dream about the sound of the gears turning, or the way the lamp beam burned across my hands that night. Because deep down, I understood what Elias meant in his last words. The sea doesn't let go of its debts. It just changes the collector. And maybe that's why I keep hearing it when I'm alone. When the rain hits the window, when fog rolls in off the bay. That low hum, that whisper curling through the wind. Keep the light on. Sometimes when I can't sleep, I look toward the cliffs. And every so often, I see it. That faint, golden glow turning through the mist. Steady. Patient. Waiting. And I wonder, did the sea forgive him? Or did it just pass the duty on to me? If you felt that chill run down your spine, imagine standing in that lighthouse alone, hearing the sea whisper your name. What do you think really happened at Cape Solace? Drop your theory in the comments. And don't forget to follow for more dark mysteries that refuse to stay buried.